Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do our second mixed haul and get into uh, the Everyman Library. Have you heard of the Everyman Library? I thought maybe I'd get into the Everyman Library during the course of this video. Now, this is a big haul because it's a mixed haul because it has books and it has films and it has, I think it even has a couple of CDs. I'm not sure. I have to get a check in the box. It's been a week or so since I've purchased this stuff. But I went to my local bookseller who I know, who I worked with back in the 90s and 2000s, if I remember correctly. I worked there for a few years. Did a lot of reading while I was working in that bookstore, and I still buy books from the guy. And he gives me really good deals on them as well. So I collect certain books, and one of them that I collect is the Everyman Library. So when I get to some Everyman Library books, I'll explain what the Everyman Library is, and maybe a little history lesson on the Everyman Library and what it all entails. And maybe if you don't collect that library, maybe you'll start collecting it as something fun to do. Or if you do, then maybe this information is something that you might know, and maybe I'll give you some more information, or you'll see some books that you haven't seen before in that library as well. All right. So basically, this is mostly going to be books, but there's going to be other things as well. So basically, I went to a bookstore, bought a whole bunch of books, and then I went to other places to pick up, whether it was a private sale or going to a thrift shop or whatever. Right. So I did pick up a bunch of stuff from all over the place, but I figure I'd do it all in one. This is probably going to be a pretty long video, so you'll maybe want to break it up, and maybe if I get tired and maybe I'll break it up into maybe 2 videos or 3 videos. We'll see. Anyway, so let's just start and see what happens. Okay. All right. So the first book I picked up, not at the bookstore, but at um, a thrift shop, is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Now, Ayn Rand is one hell of a writer. Okay. So I think her first book was Anthem, which was very good. Now she's kind of like, she's a philosopher um, who puts forth her philosophy rather than in a, I mean, she has in a philosophical text, but to bring it to the masses, she wrote fiction, all right, and she brings her philosophical ideas through her fiction. And as you can notice, this book's pretty big, all right. So um, she wrote her two main books as this one, Atlas Shrugged. This is number one, and her second book is The Fountainhead. Now she's written other books, but those are our two main books, and they're both very thick, and they're both really, really engrossing reads. Basically, what Ayn Rand's philosophy, to put it simply, is how to describe it. The reason why society exists is for men to, like, what she, I don't know if she calls them Superman. Maybe I'm confusing that with Nietzsche, but I think it's like these supermen, these capitalist uh, entrepreneurs. And so, how best to describe it? Okay, how about we describe it this way? Maybe this. Okay, so her philosophy is, okay. So let's talk about the NBA, and let's use Michael Jordan, because many consider Michael Jordan as the greatest basketball player of all time. Okay, so let's use the NBA. So her philosophy would state that the only reason, or the main reason why the NBA exists isn't because of basketball. It's so that a person like Michael Jordan can shine, can reach his potential. In other words, everybody around these great men are there to push these great men through competition or through whatever into becoming great. All right, and there are some great men and there are not great men, and it's the great men that's the whole purpose of society. So everybody else is secondary. The main point of society is for that great man, that Michael Jordan. Because if there wasn't an NBA, then Michael Jordan wouldn't reach the heights that he did. And in order to have the NBA, you need other people to play as well, but they're unimportant. The person that is important are the great ones, are the Wayne Gretzky in hockey, as the Michael Jordan in basketball. So if you're in the NBA, you're just there to prop up Michael Jordan onto your shoulders so that everybody can see him, kind of thing, right? So you have the same thing in industry and other like Rockefellers and those type of guys, all right? That's the whole purpose of society in Ayn Rand's philosophy, all right? So, and she purports that in her two main books, which is Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. And I would suggest reading this one first and then reading Fountainhead. I actually did the opposite, but I think this is her best novel, and The Fountainhead is a close second. So if you want to see how what she means by that, read this novel and read the other one, and you'll get an idea. Now, most people don't agree with that type of philosophy. That really it's kind of far right philosophy. Um, Most people think that the reason why the NBA exists is either because of the fans, all right? Otherwise, there'd be no so in other words, the people that benefit from that organization. So if it's an industry, the reason why oil and cars exist is to get people around, not to create great men like Gerald Ford or whoever, right? All right. So, but anyways, there's an argument in there, and you can read the book, and then you can discuss it with others or whatever, and see what the arguments for and against of her philosophy is, and she also wrote We the Living and Anthem, if I remember correctly, and those are thinner books, and those could be an introduction if you want to just start with an introduction to her before you read the big ones. But really, you only really need to read two of her books, and that's Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. And anyways, I'll move on because we've got so many books to go, right? All right. But this is one of the greatest, just to leave it, this is one of the greatest novels of all time. And if you read to educate and you read to become a well-rounded, informed person, this is the book that you should read. Okay. Next up is The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. Now, this was written when? Back in the 1600s, wasn't it? Yeah, 1600s. Okay, so back in the 17th century. So the language in it is old school, I guess you could say, and maybe parts of it, if you read the original text, you may be lost. But it's basically, what is it, a parable? Anyways, it's an extremely good book, and a guy goes on to travel and meets all these different people, right? So and the guy's name is Christian. So he leaves his home in the city of destruction and begins a long journey to the celestial city, which many call heaven, or utopia on earth, maybe. His adventure is full of encounters and interesting people, such as faithful, hopeful. So you see, he meets all these different people who represent certain ideals or emotions or feelings or morals and so on and so forth. So it's an allegory. That's what it's called. Like, ignorant and ignorant intellectual is me. Anyway, so I read this in its original form, but this read is a lot easier because they actually modernized the language. So if you want to read that now, it's one of the big Christian books. You'll read maybe the Confessions of Augustine and some other ones, so on. So there's a core group of books other than the Bible in Christian writing uh, that are very interesting to read, whether you're a Christian or not. You get an idea of Christian philosophy, a Christian way of thinking, its belief system, and so on and so forth. And this is another one of those. So this is inside that circle of great Christian books that you should read if you want to learn anything about Christianity. And it's basically an allegory. A guy named Christian is traveling along the road to get to, like I said, the celestial whatever, and he meets all these different people who are actually forms of morality or emotion or feeling and so on and so forth. It's an extremely good read. And this type, if you look for this one, all right, it was published by Moody Publishers, all right. Um, it it modernized the language and it makes it easier to read if you have difficulty with 17th century English, right? All right. So that's Pilgrim's Progress. Next up is this one, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds by uh, uh, Charles Mackay. Now, this book, and there's another book called The True Believer by Eric Koffler. And I read kind of both of those books at the same time, maybe 20 something years ago. And if you ever want to understand how your regular person, all right, here's a good Canadian example. Okay, so back in the 90s, the Montreal Canadiens won the cup for the first time in a good amount of time, and there was a riot outside the Forum. The Forum is the hockey arena at that time in downtown Montreal, and they turned over cars, set cars on fire, and everything else. And they did the same thing when Maurice Richard was back in the 50s when he was suspended or whatever. They had another riot. I mean, French Canadians love hockey. I mean, all Canadians love hockey, but fans of the Montreal Canadiens are really, really hardcore fans, right? A lot of them are, anyways. So, so, so just your average person, you put them in a group, and the larger that group is, the more mob mentality takes over, and people start doing shit that they would never do normally, right? But they end up, and anyway, so that type of thing is explained in this book. All right. So if you want a good knowledge on how a regular person who wouldn't break the law gets into a crowd and then becomes a zealot or an arsonist or throws chairs through windows and stuff and riots and so on and so forth, this is a book that you should read. It's extremely interesting, and you should read True Believer as well. That uh, that also takes on that part of, do crazy people join movements in order to express their craziness, or do they join movements and then become crazy? You know what I mean? Like the terrorist or the psycho, the guy that does these extremely evil things when they join a cause. Is it because of that cause that makes them do that, or are they originally that way and they get attracted to that cause because of that bad psychology, right? That's called the True Believer, and that kind of is like a side to this, right? So both of those books are really good to read, but this one is an extremely good read, um, and you get an explanation on. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in here as well, but that one is the core thing that I took from this book is, why do people just go nuts sometimes in crowds? You know what I mean? I mean, you go to a rock concert and you have a mosh pit down in front of the crowd, and people are just friggin' attacking each other in these mosh pits. Meanwhile, if they were outside, they'd be polite, saying thank you and have a good day, and maybe they'll have a coffee and have a conversation or whatever. But inside a mosh pit, they're friggin' breaking each other's legs, right? So that kind of mentality, where does that come from? And so this is a good explanation for that. Anyways, let's move on before time progresses too far. Okay, so here's the next one. All right, this is 8 Plays by Tennessee Williams. So this I picked up because it is an international collector's library, and this is a fun library to collect. Maybe I'll do um, a dedicated video to this series of books, of classic books. And you have eight tales of 8 plays from Tennessee Williams in here, all his big plays, like The Glass Menagerie, A Streetcar Named Desire, The Rose Tattoo, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. You know, all of them are in here, and you get it in one volume. And these are very nice volumes. They're kind of faux leather. They're not really leather. They're made to look like a leather-bound book, so that it looks nice on your shelf without you having to pay a leather-bound price, right? So they're kind of inexpensive, decorated type of volumes, and they're very hard, unfortunately, very hard to keep them in really good condition, because when these are exposed to the air, just like any other media that you have, over time they dry out, all right, and they don't have the gold, what is it, gilt or whatever, gilting on the papers, the end of the papers to keep them from browning, so they'll brown. And what's really easy for these ones is the top and the bottom of the spine, because the book itself, if you can look, the book itself is not, it's indented from the spine. That when you put these on the shelf and you pull them out, what happens is you end up breaking these spines. And this one's just starting already. You can see right there. There's a crack in that spine. So they're very hard to keep protected. So what I do is, when I get them, is I put them in a plastic bag, and I tape it up tightly so that the volume can't move. And then when you put them on the shelf, they still look beautiful, but you're protecting them and keeping them out of the air. All right, so that's I found a few of these, right? So that's Eight Plays by Tennessee Williams. I also found James Hilton's Lost Horizon and Goodbye Mr. Chips. All right, and also in the same type. Now this one's a smaller volume, but you can see that the damage from putting it on the shelf. Whoever owned it before would move around. You got the damage that the green, dye of it is coming apart, is fading or whatever, right? But overall, the volume looks really nice. So I'll put this in a bag as well. All right. And now, if you can notice, like there we go. That's what it'll look like on your shelf. And if you have a whole bunch of volumes, they look nice on a shelf for display, right? So, and I know I have more, but they're probably at the bottom of this box. So we'll move on to the next book. All right. Next up is The Nazi Persecution of the Gypsies. Now, everybody knows, okay, this book is written by Gunther Louis. All right. So it's a history book. And what it concentrates on is because you hear about the Holocaust, you know, for the last 70 years, you've heard about the Holocaust and how Nazi Germany, like, murdered like 6 million Jews, right? Well, it wasn't just Jews that they were killing, all right? It was homosexuals they were killing, and it was gypsies. Now, gypsies uh, were thought below human by the Nazis, all right? And so they were eliminated along with the Jews, right? So this book by Louis um, goes into that in more detail because there's been so many books written about the Jewish, deaths in the Holocaust, but not much written about the Gypsies. So if you can find this book, The Nazi Persecution of the Gypsies, you get a more in-depth look at the whole cost of the Holocaust, if you know what I mean. So um, the Gypsies were picked up just like the Jews were, right? And I haven't read this book, but I picked it up, and we'll see when I get to it. I have more difficulty reading lately as I get older, right? So I don't read as much. All right, next up is The Comedy of Errors by Shakespeare. Now, if you're a book collector as well as a reader, these Oxford editions, okay, it's called the Oxford World Classics, Oxford World's Classics. They're very, very nice editions, and they're uniform, right? So if you want to do a less expensive way of collecting and creating a library that's fun to access and also looks nice on a shelf, these Oxford University Press Oxford World's Classics are the latest editions, which are these ones. All right, they look really nice. All right, are good to collect. Also, the latest Penguin Classic are really nice to collect. But what you need to do is you can't put them on the shelf like this, okay? Because they'll fall over unless they're tightly put beside other volumes. All right, they're going to fall over and they're going to warp. All right, and they're also going to these and the penguins are notorious for the paper. They don't use the most expensive type of paper because this book was 10.95 in the U.S. You know what I mean? So it's not an expensive book to buy. So what you need to do is you need to get a plastic bag like I do with my DVDs and Blu-rays and so on and so forth, and just cover it. And then when you put it on the shelf, it looks really nice and it'll hold its shape. And if it leans over, it doesn't move the book. The book will not curve or whatever, right? And it keeps it clean and it keeps it white because this will yellow over time. And The Comedy of Errors is not a book I've read by Shakespeare, so I can't really talk about it much. I've read much of Shakespeare's comedies and some of his tragedies, but that's one that I haven't read. So, all right, next up is the Bhagavad Gita, as it is. All right, so this edition, which is put out by, it's very hard to say his name, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Did I brutalize it? All right. Anyways, in Canada, I don't know if it's in the States or Europe, but in Canada, this is the most popular version of the Gita, was what they call it, right? The Gita is basically, there's two main texts in the Hindu religion, two large, huge, I can't remember what they're called. Anyways, there's two large religious texts. And this section is taken from one of them. Can I remember the names of them? I can't. But anyways, it's a section in one of the sacred texts of Hinduism, and it explains a lot of the philosophy, the philosophical part of Hinduism, because it's about two brothers who are at war, and one brother gets tired and sits down, and is it Krishna? I think it's Krishna that visits him. Um, yeah, Krishna visits him. All right, so. Um, on the battlefield, and they go over the reasons why he's fighting his brother and whether it's just or not. And then it gets more into the philosophy of it, and an extremely good read. And if you really want to learn about Hindu religion, this book, what's called the Gita, everybody shortens it to the Gita, is one of the books you need to read. All right, and there's a few others, but this is one of the main core books of Hinduism that if you want to learn about Hinduism, that you should read. All right. Next up is Norman Davies' History of Europe. Look at how thick this book is. All right. So this, even if you read it, you're not going to get the whole history of Europe. This is like an overview and little in-depths here or there of the history of Europe. So you get an overall view of it, and then you can further read if you want to even go into the individual countries' history as well. But this is a pretty thick book. It's going to take you a while to get through it, and you'll get a very good overall understanding of Europe and its history, since the beginning of time up until when was this published? It's been recent. It's recently, so sorry to slow us down here a bit. So, 1997. So about the turn of the century, and it's one of the better reads when it comes to European history. Right? So it's called Europe: A History by Norman Davies. All right. You know what? What am I doing? I don't even, let's put this on. I'm talking through it, but maybe my voice isn't loud enough, so maybe I should put it on. Hopefully this isn't making too much noise when I do it. All right, there we go. All right, so that was Europe a History. All right, here's the next one I found in the International Collectors Library. All right, and it is the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, which is a book I've read, which is very interesting. Do you think I can tell you the details of the autobiography? No, I read it like 20, 30, 20 years ago, maybe. Um, what it is there's a set of 51 or 50 volumes called the Harvard Classics, which was put out by Harvard, a professor at Harvard, saying that if you want a good knowledge, uh, like what people at Harvard get, then these 50 volumes, if you read them all, you'll get a good universal type of education. And I think the first book in that is, and that's where I read it, was the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. It's one of the first volumes in that group of 50 books. All right. So next up is Quo Vadis by Henry Sienkewitz, and I know nothing about this book. It's just in the International Collectors Library, and I have not read this book, and uh, this one has gone under my radar. So we'll move on to the next one. So this is basically the Holy Bible. All right, the English Standard Version. All right, so even if you're not Christian, it's good to pick up the Bible because that's where the core stuff that Christians talk about all the time comes from here. The Old Testament, which is basically a revised version of the Torah, which is the one of the holy books of Judaism, right? So, and then the New Testament where it introduces Jesus and all of his teachings, right? So I picked this book up um, to reread it in a different version because I usually, when I read it, it was in the King James version. And another International Collectors Library volume, which is Poor Richard's Almanac by Benjamin Franklin again. So I have not read it. So we'll move on to the next book. All right. So let's do some CDs. Okay, so I picked up Beastie Boys' "Ill Communication." Um, this is their best, in my opinion. All right, I think it's better than Paul's Boutique, which a lot of people think is the Beastie Boys' second best album behind "License to Ill." But I think this one is their second best uh, album. And if you don't know who the Beastie Boys is, you know they're up there with all the greatest hip hop artists of all time. All right, next up is the Guess Who. All right, so the Guess Who is arguably Canada's greatest band, although you'll get an argument from me because I think it's the Tragically Hip. But these guys were back in the '60s with that rock revolution and everything. Um, you know, you speak of uh, American bands like the Doors, or British bands like the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, and then you had a Canadian band which was the Guess Who with Burton Cummings and Richard Bachman and others. Anyway, so they had a few albums that came out, and then Randy Bachman. So Randy Bachman left the group and started his own group called Bachman Turner Overdrive. Um, but their original albums are some of the greatest albums in Canadian music history. And this is a kind of like a reunion, a 2-disc CD reunion of a live show they did. When was it? In 2000. All right, so here's a picture of them. Can you see that? All right, so they're not young anymore here, but they played all their hits and everything on this in 2 CDs, and it's a fun listen if you like the Guess Who. All right, so what's up next? Okay, how about this book? Out of Africa. Now, this was a film as well, so maybe I haven't read this book, so I can't really, because I'm going to do, some book and like the movie and the book. Obviously, these two aren't the same, but if you can imagine, right? Let's say this is the book and this is the movie. Do a comparison of the two, and see which is better, the book or the movie, right? So this is Out of Africa. If I ever read it, I've seen the film, so maybe I'll compare it. But this is part of what's called the Penguin Modern Classics, although they shorten it down to the Penguin Classics. These silver or gray tinged, the black ones are the Penguin Classics. The silver one are usually the Modern Classics for a lot of the books that came out in the 20th and 21st century or whatever, right? So, um, anyways, uh, these are fun to collect as well. All right, let's do a movie now, or a trilogy. All right, so this is Vin Diesel's, um, the Chronicles of Riddick, the Riddick trilogy, right? So you have Pitch Black, which was the first, then Dark Fury, and then the Chronicles of Riddick, and it's a very good trilogy. I've seen all three of the films, and it's a toss up for me which was better. I think this is better than the Fast and the Furious set of movies, especially the early ones. Um, if you like Vin Diesel as an actor, and I do, I like his action films. They're fun to watch, exciting to watch, good to watch in the theater. This one is these three are very good. I picked this up because I have all three DVDs, but in individual volumes. So this one saves me some shelf space because now I have one volume for all three rather than three individual DVDs, right? So next up is same reason why I picked this up. Iron Man, the three Iron Man films. All right, so I have all three of them in individual Blu-rays. So I picked this up to combine them to save shelf space. All right, so part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They also have this type of thing for Captain America. They have a trilogy for Captain America, which I'm looking forward to pick up in Blu-ray in one volume rather than in three individual Blu-ray cases. And they have it for the Guardians of the Galaxy, a 2-volume in one case. Anyway, so it just saves you shelf space, so you can have it on your shelf and fit other stuff as you run out of space, which you always will when you're collecting movies. All right. Next up after that is, all right. So let's do the Everyman Library now. So this is the main purpose of this video, okay? Because I found a whole bunch of the modern versions of the Everyman Library, like this one, okay? So the Everyman Library was basically started, all right, so let's put some of these out of the way, all right? Was started back in the early 1900s, 1906 to be exact, okay? So in 1906, a guy named Joseph Dent, all right, in in England, in London or whatever, uh, who was a bookbinder, decided he thought there was a market or wanted to bring knowledge to the masses, basically the everyman, right? The everyman, hence the Everyman Library. So so what he did in 1906 is him and his son um, started a publishing company, all right, uh, and named their books the Everyman Library, all right. And basically, what their vision was to to produce a set of books that every man can read because they're cheap or not expensive. Actually, 1 shilling at the time, right? When they first started publishing, 1 shilling for a volume, right? They started publishing classic works, important works that were out of copyright, right? So I think it's 75 years um, after a book is published or after the death of the author. I think it's 75 years, and then the book goes into the public domain. It might be different here in Canada or in the United States, but I think in England it's 75 years, but it could be different. Don't quote me on it. You can look it up. But I think it's 75 years. So what they did was they took all the volumes that are available, all the different books that are available that are in the public domain, and out of all those, they wanted to select 1,000. Their ambition was to do 1,000 volumes of um, well-made, inexpensive books, so that anybody could buy them and read them, and get a better education, even if you're not rich or whatever, right? So they started this in 1906, and the first book they started with was the Life of Boswell, Life of Life of Johnson by Samuel Boswell. Now, I have not read that, but it was 2 volumes. It's actually number one and number two in the set, and so it started in 1906. All the volumes finished by 19. When did it finish? 1950, 1956, 1956. They published the 1,000th volume. Now, of course, Dent wasn't around for that. He had died by that time, and so let me give you an example of one of the volumes. Here's one of the volumes. So they've gone through a bunch of changes, but basically, see how small it is? It's like a pocketbook. It could fit in your pocket, and you could walk around with it. All right, and read it on your travels or whatever. And they made it small so that it would be inexpensive. Like 1 shilling was the amount when they first started charging for them. Right. So it started in 1906 and it ended. I think. Well, it didn't end. It went on, kept going all the way up into the 1970s, and then it kind of pittered out. Um, this was what the last of the volumes looked like. They were taller. So in 1953 they went to a taller volume, right? Um, but anyway, so you could still carry it around easily and read it, right? So basically, the Everyman Library, 1,000 volumes. People would collect them, and the first like 733 came out in like the first couple of years. But then it slowly slowed down because of World War II hit, and then they only printed like 7 volumes during World War II, and then after that they continued, and then by 1956, I think it was, they completed their 1,000th volume, and then they continued printing these volumes over time into the 70s. And then what happened was, okay, so there was a rival group, all right, I'll show you one of their volumes that started it. I'll probably do a video on them as well, which was called the Modern Library. All right, here's an example of one of the modern libraries. Okay, and they were an American publisher, not British. All right. So what was happening when the Everyman Library would come out is they would send these volumes to the United States and Canada, right, and to Australia, but it wouldn't be Dent that would be publishing. It was Dutton. E.P. Dutton was the British publisher of it. So they would send the books to E.P. Dutton, and sometimes Dutton would bind and they would send the paper, the printing of it, but then Dutton would bind them. Not all the time, but a lot of the time because it's less expensive to ship an unmade book in flat, you know, than it is to actually make the book and then send it, right? So a lot of the books you'll see you'll see on the bottom, see it says Dent and Dutton, but the earlier volumes, see this one is E.M. Dent and Sons, right? Or J.M. Dent. J.M. Dent and Sons, but other ones you'll see on the spine of both the dust jacket and the actual volume itself, you'll see E.P. Dutton on it rather than Dent. Anyway, um, so if you see it says, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it was if it has Dutton on it, it was published in the United States. If it has Dent on it, it was usually published in England. But they have sent books across. So what happened is I won't get into the modern library, which is this series of books. All right, in this video because that these were their competitors. I can't remember. I think it was in the early 30s or the late 20s that this competitor started, and why they started was a group of American publishers. I think it was Random House. Decided that the volumes that they were getting from the Everyman Library were too British centric, um, and didn't have a lot of interest for Americans because most of the volumes were like, I mean, it it was a library of 1,000 volumes from all around the world, all the best literature and philosophy. They had all these different categories of all around the world. So if you read all 1,000 of the volumes, you would have a very good um, reading education, right? So they did, go from all the different European countries, some Asian countries, and the United States, but it was British centric, right? So what these people that published the Random House that published the modern library is they decided to do the same thing, except theirs would be more American centric, right? So you'd have both of them. So both of these are fun to collect. I collect both of them. But the reason why I did so then what happened is after the 70s, maybe 82, I'm not sure, around the late 70s, early 80s, um, the Everyman Library stopped publishing books. All right, so um, and then they went on a hiatus. All right, and then I think Random House bought them. All right, and Random House published the Modern Library, right? So, and they kind of went out as well. They didn't publish those either for like 20 years, I think, around 20 years. And then in the 1990s, um, anyways, Random House bought the Everyman um, catalog, or not the catalog, but the name, and they started republishing the Everyman Library, and they published the Modern Library. So you got modern editions now, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about here. All right, so the Everyman Library, they look like this now. All right, so they're all different colors. All right, and they're really nice volumes, but they're not like a shilling anymore. Let's put it that way. Like this one, the Metamorphosis by Ovid, um, is around $30. All right, so what Random House did was they decided to start republishing both names, the Modern Library and the Everyman Library, and these ones were the nicer editions, the more high-end editions, and the Modern Library was the more cheaper editions, right? So, and these ones they decided to number, but the Modern Library ones they didn't. Um, so, but I wanted to concentrate on the Everyman Library. So basically, you look at it; it's a very nice volume, and it's I think they're up to. just over 400 volumes now, if I remember correctly. Um, where you find the number for them is is on the title page. All right, if you look at the bottom. So this volume is number 358, Ovid the Metamorphosis. But basically, I found 16 of them. Here's As a Guy's Moth, the Foundation series. All right, and this one new was $35. All right, so and it comes with a ribbon, a bookmark ribbon. All right, um, and a lot of people like to actually take off the dust jacket and put them up like that on their shelf because they really look nice together. Um, these spines look very nice when they're all different colored and they're all the exact same size. And when you put them on a shelf, they look really nice, right? So some people will take the dust jackets off. I personally do not because I like to protect the book, and I actually protect the dust jackets in Mylar. So I'll put plastic around the dust jackets to protect the dust jackets, and they still look really nice like that. So what you'll get is that, like that. All right. And basically everything that's in the in the Everyman Library and the Modern Library, even though I don't really collect the Modern Library because of the reimagining or the restart in the 90s of the Modern Library because they're not numbered anymore. I'm a collector, so I like collecting things that are numbered, right? So um, every one is like, you can't go wrong with reading them because they're the greatest books of all time, right? The Everyman Library has takes all these books that are out of copyright and then just publish them in book form. Now you can go on the Gutenberg website and download a lot of these books and read them on your phone or whatever, but there's nothing that betters a good volume, right? Um, so this one is The Rainbow by D.H. Lawrence. It's another one I got. All right. Um, now, if you want to, so here's a few examples of the old Everyman Library. So here's this one's from 1927. This one is from the 30s. All right, smaller volumes, and then they got bigger, right? So you see, after 1953, they got a little bit taller because then the print was a little bit bigger and people could read them easier, right? So here's another one. This is after the 1950s. All right. But if you really want to get into collecting these, all right, and there are there's websites out there that that has information on the Everyman Library. Um, it depends on how deep down you want to get into it, right? But I basically collected just for I want to get all 1,000. Now I have maybe 200 of them presently, maybe less, maybe 150, something like that. And I've been collecting them for like at least 20 years. Um, but some of them can get quite expensive, and if you're buying them off of other collectors, they always want more than I can find them when I'm wandering around thrift shops and things like that, or book sales and things like that. You do come across them occasionally. So in 20 years, I've found, like, let's say 150, 200 of them. Now there's 1,000 of them. So I don't know if I'll ever complete that before my death, but it's fun to try, right? But if you do decide, there's two books that you should find if you really want to get into collecting um, the Everyman Library. Now these ones are the modern edition of it, and they're a lot easier to find, but they're more expensive. Okay, so I paid like just like $9 or $10 for each volume that I got of these, right? And that's usually about what I'm paying. Sometimes I'll get lucky and find it in the thrift store for $3 or $4. But usually I'm paying like around $10 a volume for them, and there's like just under 400 volumes, I think, right now. Um, but they're fun to collect, and they're fun and they look really nice on a shelf if you're looking to have a wall that's a nice library of books that you can read or that you have read, right? The Everyman Library is because they're different, but they're kind of uniform. They're all the same size. They all have the same design. It looks really nice on a bookshelf, right? So um, But anyways, if you really want to get into collecting them, the originals, right? Not the modern ones, but these older ones, all right, that have 1,000 volumes in them. There's two books that you should get. The one that I don't have is called The Reader's Guide to the Everyman Library, and the last so that was put out by Dent and Dutton. It's like an overview made to motivate you to go buy these books, right? So it lists the books in them and gives you information on them and why you should read them and so on and so forth. But it gives you a lot of information about that, about those books, right? And this book, which I also picked up because I found it, all right, is called A Guide to Collecting the Everyman Library, and it's written by Terry Seymour. All right, so if you get this book, all right, this is a very good book. It's informative. It gives you an idea. There's a lot of images in it. It also gives you the list of all the books and their numbers. All right, which is the important thing, and it gives you different variations in the library and so on and so forth. So if you want to collect all 1,000 volumes, this is a book that you should probably find and buy. All right. Um, Here's a picture of Terry Seymour on the back with his um, collection behind him of the Everyman Library. All right. So uh, it's cool. So I picked this book up because I collect it, and the other one put out by Dent and Dutton, the actual publishers who published the Everyman Library at the time. Uh, the last was a fourth edition of it, and it came out in 1976. So it's pretty old. But you should be able to find it in secondary market. I would go on something like ABE Books, the Advanced Book Exchange, abebooks.com, and they sell a bunch of used books there. You can probably find it there if you can't find it locally. But those two books will give you a really good overview of the library. It'll give you a list of all the books, and uh, and then you can go out and have some fun collecting the Everyman Library. Now, maybe I'll show you some more of the ones that I found, because I found like 16 of them. All right, the African Trilogy by Chinua Achebe. Man, I brutalize names, don't I? All right. Um, Now here's a modern library. All right. So these were the normal volumes of the modern library, but there were some books that the modern library wanted to publish that were just too big to be put into one volume like this. So sometimes they would print two volumes, or do they? No, I don't think they ever printed a volume one and a volume two set in this type of size, the small book. What they did was they created the modern library giants. All right. And the designation, instead of being, let's say that's number 85, right? It would be G, whatever the number is. And I'm not sure how many volumes of this. I know it's over 70 volumes of the giants, right? This one is the complete works and letters of Charles Lamb. So I found that one as well. Um, Here's another volume in the modern library, The Lives of the 12 Caesars. All right. And this is a very, very nice volume. It's the dust jacket is still almost like new, except you notice the fading. See the fading here? This is what it really looked like. And there's the fading because somebody put this on a bookshelf and uh, in their living room or wherever, and the sun shined on their bookshelf, and they didn't do anything about it. So if you're going to put books or anything else that involves paper, all right, don't put it in the sunshine. Don't put it where you'll get direct sunlight on it, because it will fade it over time, and then it looks like crap. All right, so it would look much better if that spine had that color to it than this color. But I only collect the Everyman in modern libraries if they have dust jackets. I don't collect them without the dust jackets. They don't look as nice without the dust jackets, so I like the dust jackets. So that's another one, The Lives of the 12 Caesars. Um, Another of the 92, Lolita by Nabokov. All right. Now, originally, these ones here, actually, what they did was they knew people would like to take off the dust jackets, and then these books, when you put them on the bookshelf, unless you protect them, they're going to get full of dust. They're going to get old and musty and everything else, and they're going to look like crap once you take the dust jacket off, right? But when they're new, they look really nice if you put them all beside each other, all the different colors, green and beige and red and other cherry, those different colors. They look really nice on the shelf. Um, but they will fade and they'll get dusty and they'll look like crap after a while. So what the Everyman Library did originally was you didn't have this type of normal dust jacket. What you had was a plastic dust jacket. So you had a plastic covering over a half dust jacket that went that went around like this and then ended here. And then there was a thick plastic piece that went over that half dust jacket and filled in the back. And so when you put it on the shelf, you wouldn't see you would see this, right? Um, so it was nice, but the problem with that is those those plastic parts of the dust jacket would yellow very quickly, and so they would look like crap. So they stopped actually doing it. They stopped making them that way. But the early versions of them, you'll see a lot of them where they have the plastic wrap over them, and then the spine uh, is 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 exposed to make it look nice, whatever, right? But it's covered in a piece of plastic. Anyway, so um, I'll show you one when I have some in the bookshelf over there, but I don't want to leave the camera. I'll show you another time. I know I'll find another one. I'll show it in another video. So that's Lolita by Nabokov. See how the choice of the books is extremely good. Here's another one. Here's Mahfouz, the Cairo trilogy. So you actually get three books. There's a lot of them that will put more than one volume in one, like the Foundation trilogy by Asimov. You can get it in one volume. Um, Here's another one. This is the Odyssey by Homer. All right. And it has the different kind of spine. It has the black and white spine rather than this one, right? But they still look really good together. All right. Muriel Sparks, three volumes as well. So they put three of her books together in one. So the Prime of Mrs. Jean Brodie, The Girls of Slender Means, and The Driver's Seat, The Only Problem. Three of her books, right? So even though like this one was marked at $34 new, you got three books. So it's a pretty good deal, right? A lot of them are like that. Here's the next one. Malfouz again, three novels of ancient Egypt. All right. The Adventures of Augie Marsh by Saul Bellow. See what these volumes are like. You know what I mean? They're great books. You can't go wrong if you buy an Everyman Library. You're gonna grab one of the classics that are just good, right? And this one is numbered. Just to remind you, this one's number 215. You can see there on the title page, right? That's where you'll get the number. So they used to put the numbers on the spines, right? This is number 316, right? This is number 41. This is number 44. All right. Um, so what they did was they didn't put them on the spines anymore. They put them on the title page. So that's where you would refer to it, right? All right. So that's Saul Bellow's book. And I still have more. Here's another one, Carried Away by Alice Munro. Now, Canadian novelist. All right. And if you ever want to pick up a Canadian novelist, learn a bit about Canadian literature, Alice Munro, Margaret Atwood, Margaret Lawrence. We have a plethora of amazing female writers in Canada. I think, well, there are obviously there's great female writers everywhere, but Canada seems to have a concentration of them, right? Um, so Alice Munro, I mean, did she win the Nobel? I know she won a Pulitzer, a Nobel, yeah, Nobel Prize, and she's just probably the greatest short story writer ever. All right, there's Evelyn Waugh's The Complete Short Stories, another great volume in the Everyman Library, right? How can you go wrong with it? It's like I'm selling the books, right? But I'm not selling. I have no affiliation with the Everyman Library, so I just love the volumes. All right, so here's another Evelyn Waugh book, Black Mischief Scoop The Loved One Ordeal of Gilbert Pinfold, right? I haven't read this volume, so, but you know, you'll get one volume and sometimes you'll get 3 or 4 books in it, right? So, um, here's another one. The Collected Works of Gibran, you know, the guy that wrote The Prophet. If you've never read The Prophet, it'll blow your mind if you want to read it. Gibran, Khalil Gibran, all of his works, basically, the collected works of his, including The Prophet, which is the one that sells the most for him. All right. If you haven't come across The Prophet by Gibran, if you come across it, pick it up. It's extremely good. All right. So here's another of the modern libraries, the normal size volumes. They never change the height of them. They're always this size, right? Um, and this one is number 283, and it is The Selected Stories of Franz Kafka. All right, so those are all the books that I got. And if you haven't read Kafka, pick him up. He's amazing. So basically, all the books that I've shown you in the Modern Library or the Everyman Library are are basically classics in their subject matter. They're books worth reading. So if if you're new to reading and you don't know what to read, all right, um, and you don't want to you don't know what to look for and you don't know what to read. Well, the Everyman Library, these volumes that I showed you, is a good place to to get a good idea of world literature, and all the best books in them, right? And the older volumes as well. All right, so like there's a bunch of Kafka stories, right? So um, also I showed you the Oxford World's Classics, which is another set of books that you can never go wrong in, as well as the Penguin Classics or the Penguin Modern Classics as well. So either the black ones or the you know, like the silver or gray ones are you can't go wrong with any of those either. All right. So this is everything. This is everything that I got in either at the bookstore, at a thrift store, or from a private sale. And I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a bit long, and maybe you'll um, leave in the comments what you think of the Everyman Library. Do you collect the Everyman Library or the Modern Library? The older one, Modern Library, or the new ones? I didn't show you a book in the new ones, but it's because I don't collect them. Um, does this look like something that you would be interested in collecting or reading? Many of these books I've read, some of them I haven't. I didn't really want to do any kind of review of the book in this because there's just so much media here that I wanted to get through it and not make the video too long. All right, so that's what I got in my last mixed haul. All right, and now I got a bunch of. I think I'm up to about 100 of these now. Um, so with these 16, I think there's 16. Anyways, I'm not going to count them. I think there was 16 when I bought them. So of these 16 or 15, I think I broke 100 of the volumes of the 300 or 400 that are in this. So hopefully I might be able to finish this series before you know, I go on to other places. Let's put it that way, and leave this all to my son probably. Anyway, so thank you for watching. Um, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. If you want to subscribe, I'd appreciate it. I do a bunch of videos. Um, you know, every couple of days I'll do a video when I have the time from work or other endeavors that I'm doing, and hopefully they're enjoyable to you. And hopefully you got a little bit of information on the Everyman Library. Like I said, those 2 books, pick them up if you want to really get into the all the different dust jackets that were used and all the different styles of books, from their end papers on the inside, their title pages, and their spines. There's a bunch of different varieties. You can go online and get that information as well. Um, uh, I like stuff more in book form than online form, but that's just me. Maybe I'm showing my age, right? And you get a list of the 1,000 books, and then go out and have some fun collecting them. See if you can get all 1,000 before you know, get old and move on to something else, right? And read them at the same time. Like, of the 150 Everyman, the older Everyman libraries, I maybe read half of them. Some of them, like they are like British centric, and you you know some of the books from that library are kind of irrelevant today. But anyways, I have read a good amount of them. Same with the modern library. I haven't read this one, but I probably have 150 of the modern library, and I've read over half of those as well. Um, so there's always more books to read, but I'm at the age where I prefer to watch a movie and learn more about movie history than books, just because of my eyesight. It's just difficult to read, even though I have glasses that I can read with. It My eyes get blurry anyways over time, just from age, right? Anyway, so thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video. All right, and you guys have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.